Welcome to True House Stories. I'm Lenny Fontana coming out of New York City. And today we're going to take it to a bit of an organic type of story. We're going to move over out of New York, but part of it's going to be New York. And a big part of it's going to be New Jersey. We've spoken to other great producers that came out of New Jersey. But for a long time, I've been waiting to get this beautiful woman who we all adored and loved to come on the show. And she agreed. It took some time. She had to dig some moves. I was waiting. So we've been going back and forth for months. Thankfully, she agreed. She says, I'm ready. I'm comfortable. This is not my first rodeo, and we're going to do this. I said, no, I know. So I'm going to say it like this. If this was a movie, we would start like this. 1994, she shuts Movin Records. Okay? Movin Records out of Jersey, East Orange, New Jersey. Trend-setting store, started from a skate shop and developed into one of the greatest record shops on the East Coast that dealt with DJs. She had a fantastic roster of guys. And right down the street, it's like having the White House. On Prospect Street, she had Tony Humphries, who was on Kiss Master Mix 2 nights a week, and at Zanzibar. So she had that relationship with Zanzibar, the people. She was a person of the people. Musically, she brought tons of music in. She helped create careers alongside these young producers, of which Blaze, Kevin Hedge, Josh Malone, Kerry Chandler, Phase 2, Chris Herbert. I mean, the list goes on and on. Park Avenue. But I'm going to let her tell you all that stuff. But we're going to shoot the show like this. 1994, the store closes and her life goes before and after. Welcome to the show. Abbie Adams out of Movin Records, named New Jersey. Record shop, record label, proprietor, record label owner, etc., etc. Management, because she even handled breakdancers. She'll tell you all about that too, from the days of Roxy, 1018. So her story goes back, Paradise Garage, her friends, Manny Lehman, Judy Russell, and the list goes on. Welcome to the show, Abbie.
Wow, Lenny, I need a tissue. What an introduction. My goodness. Wow. It's an honor to be on your show. And it took us a minute, but I just moved. So I needed to sort of get settled before we could do this. But it is a true honor to be here with you today.
I couldn't be graced by better presence than you, and thank you for agreeing. So, what's going on in your world right now before I get to that one question that really sets, the stage on how your life panned out and how it began in music? How's things going right now?
Yeah, things are great, great, great. I just came back from a trip to Switzerland celebrating my daughter's PhD, which is amazing. Just moved back closer to my tribe, which is what I call my music community here in the New Jersey, New York area. So I was living about 5 hours away from my favorite parties like 718 sessions, and I'd have to make this pilgrimage to come to dance and listen to music. So I am thrilled. I'm much closer to my people and celebrating, moving into a new chapter of my life. So yeah, I'm doing great. Thank you.
Welcome back to the tri-state area, and we love having you come out to the parties. Of course, I saw you this past summer, end of the summer, at a festival in Jersey, which was great to see you and having dinner with you and all that great stuff. But let's, these people want to hear this story. Enough about me chattering. So, how does music find the kid, Abbie, before you went to that Roxy and all that? Because we all know that you were a fabulous skater. On 8 wheels, you would turn it out. But what happened pre to that?
Well, I grew up in a home where music was always important. I was the youngest of five, so my siblings listened to everything from Elvis to The Who. Vinyl was very, very important. Jukeboxes. Hey, it was AM radio was all we had back in the 60s when I was just a little kid. And there was the church choir and piano lessons. And my parents loved Broadway shows. So I was fortunate to go to the best Broadway shows: Hello, Dolly, Sound of Music, West Side Story. So music was always there for me. So grew up around it.
How did you find yourself trekking into New York?
So the 70s were sort of the spin point, the catalyst for me. I remember in 1974, I was listening when I first got my driver's license. I was listening to WPLJ. Of course, we had FM radio by then in the car. And a friend of mine got in my car and said, "What are you listening to?" And changed the dial and put on Frankie Crocker on WBLS. And that was sort of like an aha moment for me. The late 70s was such a just an incredible time of really good R&B music. Bands, Earth, Wind and Fire, the Spinners, the Commodores, really great music, which just resonates with me. You know, real instruments, hooks, lines, verses, lyrics. And then, of course, in the late 70s, and the Paradise Garage both opened. So my trips into the city really started for skating. The Eight Wheels at the Roxy, which had a Richard Long sound system, an incredible wooden skate floor. I always skated as a kid. Twin City, Florham Park in New Jersey. But the Roxy was very special. And I like to tell people that at the Roxy, I went to Danny Krivit University. DJ Julio and Danny were the DJs there at the Roxy, and they gave me quite an education on just wonderful, wonderful music. That was R&B. It was the end of disco, and there was this magical moment where things were morphing, changing. And one night, a friend took me to the Paradise Garage. Now, it was very difficult for me to get in there because you either had to have a passport saying you were 25 if you wanted to be a woman and go on a Saturday night, or you needed to have a membership card and be gay. And I didn't have a passport and I wasn't gay. So it took me a minute to even maneuver my way in on a Saturday night. But the feeling when I first went in there was unbelievable. So the late 70s was a real springboard for me between the Roxy and the Paradise Garage, and the other undertone of where music was really beginning to go, 78, 79.
In your recollection, before you stepped into the Roxy, did you go to your neighborhood spots, like, the clubs around where you lived?
Yes, 75. My boyfriend at the time, who was also the man that I opened the skate shop with, Aram Brown, we'll give him a shout out. We were hustling. So we went to the Starship on 42nd Street. That was probably my first club experience. And there was a club, I've tried to do research to find the name of it, but it was somewhere near Patterson or Clifton, similar to the Starship, that had a DJ. But we're talking 74, 75. So really, disco was still happening, and everybody was doing the hustle and afros and jumpsuits, and all of that was going on. So correct, there was that moment before.
So, everyone, ladies and gentlemen, let's be clear. It wasn't that she found Saturday Night Fever and decided to go out. She went out because it was the thing to go to at the time. Disco had already begun. And Frankie Crocker, I remember at that time, was already playing a lot of disco from
Yeah.
MFSB, right?
Yes, very progressive. And radio was totally different then. It wasn't pre-prescribed.
Frankie Crocker,
Would play all kinds of things. He had total freedom to introduce new things. Now radio is just so darn formatted and controlled by ClearTel and these large conglomerates that tell you how many times you have to play a certain song. But it was an incredible time there with freedom. And Frankie also used to go to the Paradise Garage, so he would play things like Gwen Guthrie, or he always had, was it a secret weapon? You would remember, Lenny. It was always like every week there was some record that he would like roll out and introduce people to.
Correct. As a child, as younger, because I'm younger than you would hear Frankie say something like this. This is something I heard at the Paradise Garage this
Yeah.
weekend, and I'm going to play it for you in a moment. And it would be just like a McFadden and Whitehead record. It would be Kenny Gamble Huff record. It's like, a new, I heard Teddy at Studio 54. As a kid, I didn't know what that meant, but I understood later. But at that time, he was telling us social media way through radio, through his eyes, what he was experiencing. So I can relate totally what you're saying.
That's right. And everybody hung on his every word. And then there'd be the search immediately where people would go out many times because of the way everything was analog. He would play stuff way before it would even come out. He would have a cassette or a reel or a sample of something. This was even pre-DAT back then. And there would be this teaser. There would be this build up, this desire for people to want to get their hands on a record. Sometimes, I mean, like the Beach Boys, it took well over a year, maybe even two, before some of the Peach Boy material came out. And it only made people's yearning so much more. Now music comes and goes so quickly, you know?
Well, let's credit Larry Levan for that. He was, let's put it in a better way, he was testing each week a new version. So everybody was leaving the club every week going, what's that record? Where do I get it? They were bothering Manny Lehman. They were calling this person, Albert, at Downtown Records. I mean, it was like that. What's this record Larry's playing? Some people would know, but Manny Lehman knew because he was always around them. So you wanted to know, you asked Manny, what's that record? So for a year, that Don't Make Me Wait was flying around. You heard it.
Lenny, all music though. I mean, and let's give credit to Tony and Timmy and people. I mean, Timmy was playing Runnin' by Colonel Abrams, which candidly never even came out except for as a bootleg. That was 1981 when the first version of Runnin' by Colonel Abrams, maybe 92, but I mean 80, sorry, 81 or 82. But those things would be played all the time in clubs prior to release. Maybe not 2 years like the Peach Boys, but months sometimes. And then the whole process of how a record is made. I mean, first you'd record it on reel to reel, and then sometimes like Timmy would have the reel and he'd play samples of stuff on his BLS mix. But then you'd have a test pressing or the lacquer. The lacquer would be first. You'd listen to that. If it sounded good, maybe you'd make 10 test pressings. And then you'd have those key people that you would get it to at, the Tunnel or Danceteria or the Garage or Zanzibar. And then those people would start playing it. So the PR, the hype machine was like crazy. The buildup for records, which was part of what made that time so special.
That's right. Timmy and Tony, Merlin,
yeah.
E. Scott, Bruce Forrest, Shep Pettibone,
right.
all rocking. That's it. Then you got Larry Levan. That's 10 people right there, whatever it was. The 10 major players at all these clubs rocking your track. Bang. It was instantaneous. The city was out of control looking for the record. Every DJ wanted this record, and they would bother each record shop. And because I know this is going to come to your time as you started, as Danny's playing a record or Louis Vega's playing a record, whoever it was at the time, Jelly Bean at the Fun House. You're doing your thing at Roxy. How does it transcend from you going as a roller skater, music aficionado, historian, and all that, learning musicology from a great teacher like Danny Krivit, because his knowledge is quite extensive. We all know that he's like really extensive with his knowledge and his musical styles. How do you go from taking that to saying, you know what, I'm going to start something and a business out of it? Where's that begin?
Well, I needed a pair of skates, and there were no places in New Jersey to buy skates. So opened up a skate shop with my boyfriend, and that did great. We opened in 1980, and we sold a lot of custom skates. Then the Roxy changed hands, and I approached the new owners and asked them, did they have a pro shop or a plan? They said no. So I opened a second roller skating store at the Roxy in New York. And then my boyfriend and I were going to the garage pretty regularly at that point in time. I mean, there were so many different places to go in the 80s. And he built a coffin, with the floating turntables on the rubber bands, and had two 1200s. And he would just, in between customers or building custom skates, he would just play records. And people that were skaters would come in and say, oh, what is that? Where can I get that? And every Monday we were closed, and we would make the rounds. We would go see Albert and Joey at downtown. We would go to Vinyl Mania and see Aggie and Judy and Manny and Charlie. We'd go to Sounds on St. Mark's Place that was basically rock, but you could find unbelievable gems there for a quarter or 50 cents. And we would spend all day record digging. So I told the people that would ask for the music, well, I can get you that. Just come back next week. So it started very small. I met Freddie, who was another woman in the dance music industry back in the early 80s, which was rare. And Freddie owned Pearl Music. And I realized that I didn't have to buy the records from Frankie and Albert and Charlie. I could buy wholesale, because what I was doing was I was buying from downtown and then bringing it back and adding a quarter or 50 cents. But it was an education, because I was learning. I learned from my customers and what they wanted. I learned spending time in the record stores, and it just started to grow, and word got out that you could go to the skate shop to buy 12 inches or classics or hard to find stuff. And 83, 84, skating wasn't as popular anymore. So one side of the store was skates and leg warmers and boot covers. And the other side of the store, I put up pegboard and started selling domestic 12 inches imports. We had a classic wall. And little by little, 83, 84, 85, I started meeting more people. I was asked to be a billboard reporter, which at the time carried an immense amount of clout. This was pre-SoundScan, so Billboard would call you weekly and ask you for your top list, depending on what kind of a store you were. I reported to the dance 12-inch list, and Billboard would call me every week and I would give them my list. But meanwhile, the large record companies that had huge staff and budgets would have their promotion company, promotion people. There was like Brad LeBeau, Bobby Shaw, Carrie Vance. These people would call me and say, well, look, we're going to send you a promo copy of this new whatever it was coming out. We want you to listen to it. If you like it, you should order it. So I was constantly getting new stuff from the A&R promotion people, which led to all kinds of great parties and tickets and swag. But it also opened my eyes to a lot of music that was cutting edge or not out yet. So it also helped inform me and keep me up to date. And so it kind of just really exploded in like 84, 85 to the amount of people that knew about the store. People would come from England, from Japan, Philadelphia. We also did mail order. Eventually, Judy Russell left Vinyl Mania, and came to help me in 86 because it morphed into a record label. And that was because there were so many of my customers that were just so gifted and talented. My shop was in the mecca of incredible talent. You had CeCe Rogers right down the street. Dana Owens, Queen Latifah, lived right around the corner. Kerry Chandler lived right on Central Avenue. Naughty by Nature lived right around the corner. Lauryn Hill was in South Orange. I mean, the amount of people there. And then the customers were starting. Technology was such that it made it easier for people with smaller budgets to buy a drum machine and the equipment that they needed that could create music right in their bedrooms or in their basements. So a lot of people started bringing in music. And Boy Jarvis was a very close friend of mine. And if anybody was ever at his place in Brooklyn, the amount of tapes he had of music, I mean, whoa, there was just so much there. And I said, well, let's put out a record. That was the whole thing. I was going to put out a record, and the first record was with Boy Jarvis. And then it just kind of, by then I had a logo, I had a pressing plant, I knew the people to get the test pressings to, and it all just kind of started to snowball. One record turned into another, and that's candidly exactly how it all fell into place.
Two questions.
Organically. You used the word organic before.
It's perfectly
It really
right.
was. None of this was this big master plan.
First of all, we're looking at you going, what's this girl know about this music? And she knows very much a lot about this music. But that's the first thing. Second thing is, I want to know how the name Movin came along. And was the Jersey store first before the Roxy's for the people to understand? Or was Roxy first that morphed into the Jersey store?
Oh, no. It was a skate shop. And I think the name probably came from Karam. I think it was, I'm not 100% sure, but I think it was inspired by the Movin song by Brass Construction, spelled the same, Movin apostrophe. And we came up with a great logo, and Movin Skates just morphed into Movin' Records. So, and that was 1980. And the store in the Roxy, I believe, was a little bit after that. That was like 81. It was the year later that I opened the skate shop. And the skate shop at the Roxy had to kind of morph because on Friday nights, they started having hip hop in the club. In 1982, there was a promoter named Lady Blue that went to Steve Hanel and Michael Butler, the owners of the Roxy, and said, hey, we need a space to really do big hip hop parties in New York City. We want to take it from the Bronx. And she worked with Fab Five Freddy, and they brought in Afrika Bambaataa. They started having these parties, these incredible hip hop parties at the Roxy. So on Friday nights, I'd take all the skate stuff and put it away. And I sold David Spada, Dago jewelry. I worked with the graffiti artists, and we sold graffiti t-shirts. And then, Sunday night for the skaters or Saturday night, I'd go back and sell skates again. So I don't know, there was some kind of an entrepreneurial bug in me.
I think so. I mean, you totally got entrepreneurship in you. Management, the whole thing. It's in you. So the music is playing a catalyst to you business-wise without even being business, because you enjoy the music so much that you're doing the other parts to bring in the income while you're enjoying. You're trying to give your customers at the time like a gratuity for buying the other stuff by keeping the prices reasonable enough, which was a smart move. And it made, also the other smart move was, let's be real, Roxy was a mecca. People who knew about skating or dancing, Roxy's one of those clubs people spoke about in New York. It wasn't Paradise Garage, but it had a massive dance floor.
Yeah, and an incredible sound system.
Yeah, no question. No question. I remember that like yesterday, that sound system.
Yeah.
It was excellent. But, you know, it seems like every time you tell me something, it's like kind of like Forrest Gump way. It just like you're there, you smiled, and you got the award. It's like it just happens. It's wonderful. It's like there was no scratching to get to these people. Like, some people in our business, we've watched, they got thrown out of the DJ booth how many thousands of times? They got thrown out of record labels. We don't want your stuff. It kind of came a little bit easier for you. Why?
Lenny, I'm a firm believer that when you are aligned with what your passion is, the universe kind of takes over. And it was just so much a part of me that it just kind of flowed. And I would meet people, and I didn't find it cutthroat. I didn't find that when I went to Vinyl Mania or downtown that any of those people thought that it was competitive that I also had the shop in New Jersey. Everybody was just so passionate about what they were doing. We all kind of helped each other. And when you live your purpose, I do find life kind of falls into place. It was, I do agree that I think some people looked at me like, what does she know? I know in my store, people would come in and I was the last person they would ask about a record. They would ask all the other people that I had working there first. And sometimes I would be the only one that could identify the track or know the information about when it was coming out. So I think it was educational for me, but I also think it was educational for some of the people to realize that, I did kind of have an idea on what was going on.
Look, I went through the same thing. When I was going around those days, they kept saying, "What's this white boy know about this music?"
But you had the same feeling that I had. It captured you. And look at you now, right?
Yeah, from the time it started, I'll never forget. And when I met you years ago through Camacho, that's why I remember meeting you. I knew you, but I physically met you with Camacho. I remember that.
Yeah.
And he rest in peace, a sweetheart. Crazy, always arguing and angry. But
That
if it,
captures him.
yeah, that was him. If he wasn't arguing, but God bless him, that was him, just the way it was. How do here we go. You meet Freddie, you start buying records from direct distribution and you're doing a record shop. How do you get into the pressing aspect? Was it something that somebody said, "Hey, Abbie, we're surrounded by a lot of people around here. What do you think?" Or were you watching somebody else at another record label? Was something giving you the muse, or are you just, again, the Forrest Gump? You just did it, you got the award. How's that work? Tell us. Come on now.
I think, I got to give Boyd a lot of credit because I was just so blown out by like how much music he had. And candidly, always very underestimated and not given the credit. Late 70s, Boyd had his little keyboard under his arm and he was going to house parties playing keyboard overdubs. The early visual stuff, the Colonel Abrams stuff, Release the Tension and Runnin', that stuff, that is all just Boyd, just straight up incredible sounds. And I just was going to see what it was like to put out a record. There was a pressing plant right in Newark called Some Plastics that it was just so easy for me. I could just get in the car and go down there and talk to them. And there was no master plan. It was, let me put out a record. And then,
Let me throw a curveball. I'm going to throw a curveball. I'm just thinking this. Yes, it's all around you. Are you also rich in a sense financially at this time to be able to have expendable cash to play with, or you just took a risk and said, whatever happens,
the
happens?
second, the second, there was not, you know, tons of cash. It was always a very tight turnover, to take the money that I had just made on a Friday and Saturday when the store was busiest, and on Monday, try to figure out what I needed to keep the people coming to the store. No, it was, and it wasn't that expensive. I mean, you'd work out a deal with the person that you were going to put the record out with. Lots of different people worked lots of different deals. So it might be a cash advance or splitting it, or you'd figure it out the royalties or the publishing. $100. I mean, Boyd's stuff was pretty much ready to go. We did take stuff into the studio where you would pay somebody like a Larry Patterson or a T. Scott to do a remix, Kerry Chandler. So there was that money too, but then for $500, you could get a lacquer made. And then test pressings were, I don't know, $20 a piece or something. And then once you started pressing, you would press 1,000 to begin with. So it was always borrowing from Peter to pay Paul, just kind of shuffling the money around.
So you had the situation where they would call a one stop. So you're the label now. They're calling you for the actual pressings. Listen, we need 250 copies. We need 500 copies. We need 150. You were doing the direct mailings to some record shops. You also were going to, say, Downtown 161, Unique, all the distributors, right?
That's right. Watts was exporting it overseas. Unique was distributing. I'd also put boxes in my car and drive around and deliver directly to Vinyl Mania and Downtown. So yeah, it was a hustle, but it was so much fun. Being on the cusp of something that people wanted was always just what fueled me, the anticipation and the excitement but I also used to do that with new records that came out that I wanted to sell at the store. There would be times that my UPS driver wasn't going to come until I knew 5 p.m. on a Friday, when people would be in there and the store would be packed, and I knew there were 50 copies or 2 boxes of some hot new track that everybody was going to want. So I literally would get in my car and I knew the UPS guy's route, and I would flag him down and give him the cash, because at the beginning it was all COD. I would give him a check or cash and pay him and get the music and race it back to the store. So it was, that was part of it. That was so exciting.
Ladies and gentlemen, let me paint this picture. September of 87, word goes out that Paradise Garage is losing its lease. So the writing's on the wall, things are changing. New York City loses a phenomenal club. And the DJ goes silent for a little bit. Of course, he moved to Studio 54, Larry Levan, and did Thursdays and this and that. Your relationship begins closely with Zanzibar, like your scope with Tony. How does that relationship begin? And how important is it as a record shop and record label having Tony Humphries with Kiss Master Mix as like your man? You know what I mean? That's like Mel Sharon with West End and Larry Levan.
Right. That's a great question. I mean, I was going to Zanzibar. Zanzibar has an incredible history. I actually don't know what year it opened, but Al Murphy was so far ahead of the curve. I would want to say that Zanzibar was probably opened before the Paradise Garage. They opened with live tigers and all kinds of crazy stuff. But Zanzibar was always an option because I was going into the Roxy and skating 5 or 6 nights a week. I would work all day in New Jersey and then go to the Roxy at night. Sometimes it was really nice just to go down Broad Street and get to Zanzibar. So I frequented Zanzibar. I knew Shelton Hayes first. I met Shelton through my years modeling, which was before the record store. And Shelton and I were good friends. So when he was manager, I would go and visit Shelton in the office where, of course, there'd always be Pat, or Larry Patterson would always be in the office with Shelton at Zanzibar. And I knew Tony because he was the house DJ there, and I had a record store. So always people that worked in my store, Tony would always manage to, he wouldn't steal them because they would work for both of us. But at night, they would go with Tony down to Zanzibar where he would make his reel-to-reel tapes for Kiss, which is how those mixes were done. Tony would actually go in on a Thursday night into Zanzibar when the club was closed and record. And Alan Anderson, Joe Smith, that both worked for me, they would go with Tony those nights. So Tony would get records from our shop. So that was kind of happening at the same time. But between Shelton and Tony and I, we really saw what was happening with the Jersey sound, which had a very unique, different sound. It was much more fueled by gospel. Blaze, Adiva, these people were Kenny Bobby, and these people were like right out of the church sound, CeCe Rogers. So the Jersey house sound was very soulful, very melodic, wonderful inspirational lyrics. Phase 2, Reachin'. That was the third song on my label. It was just positive music. In the 80s in New York City was a very different time. It wasn't like New York City now. So Shelton and Tony and I really realized what was happening. There was a lot of attention coming from particularly the UK because there wasn't digital files. So if you had a really good record like Phase 2 Reachin', I was able to license to labels in BCM in Germany. Joey Negro, Republic Records, bought that for the UK. So I was able to license that record again and again and again for pressing and distribution in different countries. Very unlike today where you load something up on TrackSource and then everybody around the world can buy it. So there was a lot of interest. People like Pete Tong, Joey Negro would be very interested in what we were doing. So 2 things happened. That was the Winter Music Conference. New Music Seminar, was the precursor to Winter Music Conference, which I don't even know. I think that's kind of waned at this point, but everybody was coming to New York City. Tom Silverman would have this huge convention. There would be panels and lectures and parties. Well, why can't we get them to come to Zanzibar? Everybody was like bootlegging or recording Tony shows and sending them everywhere. So let's get them to come. Let's feature Jersey artists. Let's really support the Jersey sound. Let's really lift it and encourage people to identify that this is sort of a unique kind of sound that we're doing. It wasn't like what Boyd and the Peach Boys were doing. It was around the same time as when, house was getting big and the Detroit sound, inner city. So we just got together and wow, we had so many people come out from New York City during New Music Seminar to come to our parties. I think it was 2 or 3 years in a row we had a big party. And it was like a trifecta. The club helped support the radio, helped support the store, and we were able to work together in this collaboration that really just helped lift the music and the artists. Because Tony Humphrey has such a still an incredible ear for finding the right songs. And Tony takes it very seriously, spends hours and hours going through music, listening, even finding little glimmers on some records that, at that point, he was also remixing a lot of music. This was pre-Yellow Orange, which was the label that he started, which, by the way, there's a reunion of Yellow Orange Records coming in a couple of weeks in New York City. But Yeah, and we also started the New Jersey Coalition, which was a mixture of a lot of the producers and artists in New Jersey. Ace Mungent, I mean, Ace Mungent was so far ahead of his time on Ace Beat Records. I actually licensed Intense, Let the Rain Come Down from Ace. He was early Jomanda Ace. But like backroom productions, Fly Guys, Movin artists, there was a whole bunch of us, Burrell Brothers, Smack Music. We all got together and created the Jersey Sound Coalition. You might see that on some of the labels from the Movin releases, just to support one another. If somebody's having a release, let's time it. I don't have to put my release out the same time yours is. Let's stagger it a couple weeks apart. Let's all show up at each other's release events. And I just felt it was really important to support each other. That's how things really get magical and make a difference.
How well were the records doing in the United States side,
Yeah. I mean,
opposed to
they're
the
very.
UK when you licensed them over?
Yeah, well, I don't actually know all the numbers when things were re-released, but in the United States, I mean, I would go in on Wednesdays to Kiss and BLS with my little record bag, and I'd meet with Vinnie Brown and Fred Buggs, who were the music directors. You would literally take your record there and have them listen to it and ask them to play it. So I'm very grateful because there were songs like Phase Two, LaShondra just started, Vicky Martin Not Gonna Do It, that were all regular rotation on BLS. I remember the first time I was in my car and I heard Phase Two Reaching on the radio. I just couldn't even wrap my brain around it. So 12 inches could easily sell 50, 60, 70,000 copies on a reasonably good record. I'm sure there were plenty that sold more than that. And then you would get the songs like Sybil, So Special, that then the larger labels like Atlantic started releasing 10 City and Sybil. And then you've got these big machines with lots of much more money for promotion. I hate to say it, but payola and all of that, which was a very big part of the music industry in the 70s and 80s, because it was pre-sound scan. It wasn't about scanning exactly how many copies of something. So very different from now. I hear now with the amount of music that comes out digitally that maybe people are lucky if they sell 1,000 copies, but I don't know. I'm going to lean into you, Lenny, to
Abbie, Abbie, how often did you hear about that brown paper bag with those crispy hundreds in there?
I wasn't a part of that, but I heard those stories.
Many times, me too. Records found their way on radio because of those brown paper bags. You can't do that now in the digital business. You can't even get in touch with anyone in the digital business. Maybe Traxsource you could speak to, but as far as the streaming side of Spotify, they're not interested in talking to anybody.
Yep.
So it's tough. It's a tough game. The way that you organic, I'm gonna use that word organic because that's what it was back then. It was just something, hey, we feeling this record. Let's see where it goes. If we hit those numbers, you're not even thinking about 50,000. You're thinking about let's move 500 pieces. Let's move 1,000 pieces. Right?
So it's all about volume now. And it's about you put something out and then you got to have the next one right behind it. And it's more about volume. Someone recently told me that there's something like 100,000 cuts coming out every day. I mean, wow. I hate to use the word, but how watered down. How can you have quality in that many releases?
You can't even plan quality with that. Saturation is what the word is. It's saturated, watered down. Okay, A&Ring back in the day was an art. Few can do it fabulously. Tony Humphries did it from a radio perspective as a DJ from the booth and also helped to create a lot of people's careers because of what he did on radio and the booth.
Yes.
And
Yes.
then the rest, like a waterfall effect, would be turned on to something that basically like throwing ether in the air and it just happens. Okay. That kind of spark handing off that to a person saying, can you play the record? Please, what do you think? Let me know. Doesn't exist like that anymore. It exists, yes, amongst us, but it doesn't exist on the level that we all came from. That kind of
I
power,
mean,
you know?
what a special time. I mean, what a special time it was back in the 80s for music, for record labels.
Now, check this out. Danny Rampling comes to New York, wants to bring Tony Humphries to play in England for the first time. So I think Tony's pretty shocked, like all of us would be, because he's got his residency 2 nights a week and then doing the radio and the whole thing.
Well, if you know Tony, you know he's an extremely humble man. So
God,
it
please.
would not take much for Tony to be shocked.
Bashful? Yeah, of course. What? Me?
Yeah.
Why? What was that at that time to hear somebody of a family member? Because you have to look at it as like family.
Yes.
Is taking something that you all created in the neighborhood and bringing it overseas. What
Yeah.
change happened then?
I mean, huge, huge. I remember there was a promoter that I went to Brixton Academy. We went with Phase Two, Vicky Martin, LaShondra. I think Jomanda might have gone as well, but I mean, it was mostly Movin roster to this club and nobody knew who I was. And I went into the club and I was standing in a corner and they put Reaching on and I couldn't believe it. I mean, I had tears coming down my face, and this wasn't even with Phase Two on the stage. This was just the DJ who I can't remember who it was. I should, but I don't. Put the record on, and the dance floor went wild with everybody with their hands in the air. So at the same time, Tony was like being asked when Ministry of Sound was opening. I went to Brixton Academy with my artist. When I turned on the radio and heard my song on BLS, it was mind blowing that what we were doing, what we loved, what the dancers, I mean, we're talking about they weren't going to Zanzibar for alcohol. They weren't going to well, they did have a bar at Zanzibar, although I don't think that was the reason people went. But the Paradise Garage had no bar. These people were going for the music, for the dancing, changes of clothes. You'd go in, you'd sweat through your clothes, you'd have a change of clothes. But people like Larry and Tony, they don't exist anymore. I mean, Lenny, you play. How frequently do you have a gig where you were the only DJ? These guys used to take us on a journey. They would take us up, they would bring us down. I mean, you'd have to come down to have a break. You were there for 10 hours. So they would bring the music down, then they'd take you up again, and the cannons would go off, and then the rainstorm would begin. So it was all about the music and those special DJs that could do that. I mean, now you've got 5 or 6 DJs that all want to play the best music in the hour and a half that they have, so that the level of the intent stays up here because everybody's trying to showboat and do their best and play what the crowd wants. The risk, I don't think many people take the risks anymore. I think, well, I was pretty awed by your set there at the Weequay Music Festival because I saw some real creativity and risk there. But I consider you old school. When you look at these DJs now, it's just so different. And then there's the equipment. I mean, Tony played on thorns. How many people today could play with thorns and not be using equipment and I'm not a techie, so I don't know the names of all the machines, but now you just say you want to play 2 songs and you tell the computer to match the beats. And I mean, I'm sure I'm way oversimplifying it. And there's a lot of songs that probably you can't match the beats on because there is such a large discrepancy there. But these were curators, these were storytellers, these were people that would play for 10 hours, maybe go take a potty break and come back. But these were people who really, Dave Morales, he's another one from that school, Frankie Knuckles. It just, wow, what a talent. So to have like Pete Rampling come over and say, "Wow, Tony, you are a storyteller, a curator. We know your songs because they're starting to get licensed over here. Tony made so many artists, broke the music, producers even." So, yeah, it was mind blowing. And then look today. I mean, the scene is still very big in the UK, much more than here. There's not a big scene anymore. The scene now has shrunk down to Brooklyn. There's not even, back in the day in New York City, on any night of the week, you had 5, 6, 7 clubs to pick from. You had Red Zone, Tunnel, Palladium. Oh God, what were some of the other ones? Like countless clubs that you could go to on a moment's notice. Pick, area. But now there's nothing happening in New York City anymore, and the scene is in Brooklyn, where the best parties are more like a monthly party, like 718 Sessions, or, Ritual with Anane and Louie, or Here and Now, or there's so many of them, but those aren't. And the new generation, like Love Injection and Toribio, I mean, these guys, they get it. And I love what they're doing. And I love the new scene and how it's going. But it's not every night. It's once a month or once every couple of weeks. But in the UK, I think they still have a much stronger, I think dance music, house music, whatever you want to call it, is still far more popular over there than it just kind of crashed and burned here. And I attribute that partly because of how quickly rap was assimilated into radio, and videos. MTV was a big part of it. But I also need to acknowledge that AIDS in the 80s, yeah, really drastically impacted those of us that were in the dance music community, the DJs, the producers, the artists, just so quickly. A whole generation of talent in the New York City area just got wiped out. That everybody was afraid to go out. So, I've got to say that I think that had a huge impact on what happened to our scene in New York in the 80s.
You are correct on every level. Let me tell some of the viewers a few things that you brought up. Zanzibar was called Abe's Disco, opened up in 76.
Thank you so much for that. So pre-Garage, because Garage opened 78.
Garage opened up January of 77.
Okay, those were the construction parties, right?
Correct. So Zanzibar opens up 79 as Zanzibar, but Abe's Disco was open from 76 to 79. Then Zanzibar, Al Murphy takes Zanzibar, and he's takes it from a catering hall to a completely different situation, as you all know. The other part I want to bring up that she said, a whole generation of people, and I'm so glad she mentioned this, died because of AIDS. And not only because of AIDS, there was a big drug problem going on as well. A lot of our people were hung up on the drugs too. We lost a lot of people because of that, overdoses, things like that. And the AIDS was this thing, as people called it, a gay man's cancer. That's because they didn't know what the hell it was at first. As we learned through the 80s, this DJ died, this DJ died, this record promoter died. It was continuous. So it kind of makes you revert into shelter. You know what I'm saying? So you kind of hide because you're saying, oh my God, how's this all going? At first, they weren't sure if we were able to get it just from talking, saliva, cups. So people were even afraid to go out to eat. It was nuts. Remember, Abbie, it was crazy.
Even worse than that is the way that the people that were dying were being treated.
Horrible.
Just, I went to see Al Murphy when he was in the hospital, and people thought I was crazy to even go there. And you would see people, similar to COVID, how millions of people died all by themselves, which is just like nobody wants to go like that. But yeah, it was a very sad time for all of us. Yeah.
And there's another sad part that comes from what Abbie said before about people taking risks. Most DJs back in that time had residencies, and that was their club. So they opened and they closed. And when they went away, they would have a guest come. Like a couple of times Larry left, Francois covered, T. Scott played, such and such played. But most of the time it was Larry Levan, David DePino, or Joe Llanos would play at the garage. Same with Zanzibar. It was T. Scott, Larry Patterson. They set the stage of what that club musically was going to sound, how it was going to look, and they painted a picture through the night. Okay. So those were some big shoes to follow. Tony Humphrey's coming in there. He had to come correct and do his thing and really turn those people out because you have royalty playing in front of you, you know? Also, those DJs broke records too. So I give them a lot of credit because we all learned a lot from those DJs, right? So they could take a chance and drop a record in the middle of the night, a slow record, and not worry about getting fired.
Yeah, I guess that's a part I hadn't really thought about it
So
that
I'm
way. The
talking from
residency is sort of a bit of a security blanket, but
you got a paycheck every week, but you work long hours.
there were only all those clubs, Bruce Forrest,
Right.
Justin Strauss. I mean, those guys played all night. Dave Morales. There was one DJ, unless they were traveling or went away. It was not these lineups that they have now, which are just, it's crazy to me.
Here's this question. With all great things, sometimes things come to an end. Why in 1994 did you decide to close it all?
Multiple reasons. I had become a mom. The area where the store was there was a crack epidemic happening all around where the store was. There were a couple of armed robberies right on the block. I always felt like the community there looked out for me, that there were so many young people there that really benefited a lot from all the artists and what I brought to the community. But it was not great. My dear friend Charlie Grappone told me, I mean, people really weren't buying vinyl. The record industry conned us into saying, oh, the best format is going to be cassette tape. And then you have to rebuy everything in compact disc. It's a much higher level quality of sound. Well, I'm still a believer that the analog, the vinyl is still the best way. But times were changing and I was a mom and records weren't really selling anymore. And Queen Latifah and Shakim offered me a position at Flavor Unit. At that point, they were down at the old firehouse in Jersey City. And it just worked for me to close the shop and go do something different. I think at that point I was also ready to do something different. So I went to Flavor Unit and did some artist management there for a few years, which worked out for me. So it just seemed time to move on. And I never in a million years would have thought that that record label, or all these years later, someone would want to do an interview with me about that moment in time, which was meant the world to me. It still does. But the fact that other people are still curious and interested in what we were doing, that's terribly humbling. And I'm happy that other people find so much joy in the sound and the music and what we were doing.
How long did you last at Flavor Unit?
I think I was there, I don't know, 2 or 3 years. There was a lot of turmoil in the music business at the time, with changing between Gerald Busby and Andre Harrell, and a lot of the artists that I was overseeing at Flavor Unit. When that command changed over, a lot of them got dropped. There were a lot of changes happening, and it just it was crappy timing because of all my artists that got dropped during that time and that transition. So I'd say 2 or 3 years. The group that I did represent there, Rotten Rascals, they had a fairly successful album out at the time. And a few other groups that I was working with, their music never even came out because of the change there at MCA at the time. And then I moved on, and for a period of time, I totally dropped off the scene. For 10 years, 11 years, I had a little bundle of joy that I was raising, and I got a different kind of job, not even in the music industry. And I bumped into Danny Krivit. Oh, let's see. It might have been 2002. 2003, and Danny was having the 718 session parties right down the street from the Limelight. And I was ready to go back out again. I missed the music terribly. And I could drive from my house in Montclair into the city, park the car right on 21st Street, and go into the club and be home in like a half hour. So I started pretty regularly going to 718, and that kind of hooked me back in. I got involved in management. I managed Kenny Bobian for a good amount of time, helped him put out some of his, help connect him to producers like Old Landmark, and some of those songs came out during the time I was working with Kenny. And I also worked with Mickey Affleck and Jihad Muhammad, and it just then I was ready for change. My daughter then went off to college, and I once again kind of dropped out of the music industry. But I am working on some type of a storytelling documentary. I've been interviewing people for 6 or 7 years now. People like Marshall Jefferson, Vinnie Brown from Naughty by Nature. We have wonderful footage with M. Tume, who was a very dear friend. D-Train, Tom Moulton, talking about vinyl, talking about the importance of music and that incredible time between the Stonewall closing and dance music, house music, sampling. I mean, it covers a lot, so we're still fine tuning it. And there is talk in the city of East Orange about a plaque where Movin Records used to be, as well as we're working on trying to get one on Broad Street in Zanzibar for the musical impact. I mean, when you think of all the artists that came through my store, Redman, Queen Latifah, Naughty by Nature, Lords of the Underground, Mark 45 King. These kids grew up in my store. So maybe some type of historical little museum thing with some memorabilia, photographs from back in the day. But storytelling, because there seems to be so much incredible, still deep interest and curiosity and admiration for that particular sound that we had, which, the history of music, particularly Black music, I can't buy into the debate about where it started. And to me, music, it isn't siloed. Music is very cosmopolitan, and you can't tell me that people weren't traveling back and forth and or passing cassette tapes of Timmy and Tony on the radio and Frankie and the Warehouse, and music travels and it morphs. And I think all of the music that we were doing at that time all fueled each other. It grew and blossomed together. And I love that there's still so much interest in that special time. The 80s were incredible for quality music that still, I recently started following somebody on Instagram. Lenny, you might follow them. It's a father and son in Newark. Zandy. Oh, if I'm referencing it, I should have the name right, and maybe I can even find it. But these guys are doing music all from the 80s, and they have thousands and thousands of people that are following them. And I'm sure it's because it was just such an incredible time in musical history. It's just yeah.
So let's compliment you. You know, when they say forefathers, I'm going to give you this word foremother. Okay?
Thank you.
Pre to you, there was no real soulful house, Jersey soulful house. That happened along with what was going on all around you. You guys kind of seeded it, watered it, nurtured everybody, and brought it to fruition.
I love that comparison. Yeah.
It's true. That's how I saw it. And
Mm,
that's how the New York people saw it. It was like, oh, wow, all these great records coming out of Jersey. Ace Beats got his stuff. Abbie's got Movin. You got all these great producers, three generations with Kerry started, Al Smith, Elias.
Clark, Burrell, Zadiva, Carrie Chandler, Johnny Dangerous, Blaze, Casio, Camacho. I mean, you can just keep going. Michael Wofford. I mean, it was like a plethora of incredible, great.
That's why I keep using that word organic, because as much as the struggle happened, there was a lot of love and care to seeing this go further without realizing what the design was. It wasn't like you were thinking we're going to build mansions and things like that. And you're just like saying, let's make a great record so we can dance to it.
Yeah.
That's why this show's important. I wanted you to clarify that, really clarify how organic this truly was. That it wasn't manufactured like today. This was not manufactured by design. We're going to make social media to push your artist profile so that you got a big fan base so we can put the record out and feed the audience like feeding the elephants, and water it. This was, let's just see where this takes us, right?
The journey, right?
And you did it well, my dear.
We loved every minute of it.
Would you do it again? And was there any massive mistake that you say, damn it, I wish I didn't do that? Because
I'd
the greatest mistake,
absolutely do it again in a heartbeat. I would. I mean, you learn from how to do things better. And I wish I had this mind, this experience, this world life brain on that 20 something year old girl's experience. I think I was hanging out. I was loving life. I was going out almost every single night and then working. And so I lived by the seat of my pants and listened to my heart. And it is what it is. I'm proud. I'm very proud of the store, the label, my relationships with people that I still treasure my relationships with people like Danny and Tony. I terribly miss people like Judy Russell, who was a dear, dear friend. And we've lost way too many. Larry Patterson, Camacho, T. Scott, Larry Levan, John Brown. I mean, I could just go on, the people that are no longer here. I'm grateful, Lenny. I'm grateful to the people that worked with me at the store and helped me learn. I'm very grateful to my customers. I learned so much from all of them, and grateful for people that gave me a leg up and a shot as a 20 something year old white girl from Summit, New Jersey, that was thrust into and adored the wonderful R&B dance scene and music that came out of there. So no regrets, mostly just extremely grateful. And still today, I know it's kind of old school, but I still buy stuff on Apple Music. Recently, this new Stacy Kidd song, Let It Blow, kind of new music just it totally excites me, and I had to find the mix that I heard that I love so much. And I support artists. I buy it still. I listen every Saturday morning. I listen to Will Milton and his Twitch show. I listen to Twitch all the time. So I'm still in the game, but as a participant.
I can't thank you enough for being so honest about it all, as I expected.
This was great, Lenny. I love talking about this. It just, I think I glow when I talk about
She's
the
glowing, ladies and gentlemen. She's glowing and gloating over the fact that She's part of history, a big part of the history. She's very, like, she talks about Tony being very laid back about it. So is she. She doesn't toot her horn. You wouldn't even know she was part of this. She's just coming out. She's, Lenny, what's that record? It's like that. But this is what I love about all that we've come from this generation, that we loved it so much and harnessed it. And of course, the bonus was making money, but more so, the goal was to see the success and everyone to partake in the success. And it's nice to hear that you shared that and you named everyone out along the way that was part of your road.
I did not do it by myself at all. I didn't
No,
know what I was doing at the beginning. I was floundering, but
most
I was
people don't.
curious. I was curious and invested and felt the passion. And I encourage anybody who ever gets that bug and that feeling, you're doing something right when you follow that dream. That sounds kind of corny, but that's the way it all falls into place. It did for me.
Well, everyone, follow your dreams. Don't let fears stop you. Abbie, thank you so much.
Well,
I think
thank you, Lenny. This has been so fun. Thank you so much.
tune in each and every week. These are the kind of stories that we live for. Thanks again, Abbie. Take care.
Thank you, Lenny. Take care.